7:30, meeting's going to come to order. This is the November 7, 2019 meeting of the Rockport Planning Board. All members are present with, at this time, the exception of Terry Duffy, who is absent. But we do have a quorum, so we will start the meeting. As is the case, we start the meeting with a public discussion period. As some of you know who come here on a regular basis, public discussion can be on anything relevant to the planning board, but there are time limitations, which for general comments, it's 3 minutes per person per comment. So anybody have any we have a public discussion period at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, so you can pick the time you want, or you can say something at both. Usually the end of the public discussion is, here's Terry Duffy is here, so now we have a full board. So anyway, public discussion period. Any public discussion?
I guess I'll bring this up if I could.
Yeah, step up right there, speak into the microphone, please, and tell us your name and where you live.
Dan DeLuise from 53 Main Street.
Okay.
I have a gallery on Main Street, and I also live there. It was kind of brought to my attention that that there's an opportunity here for the board to consider the commercial properties in the downtown area. And I know you got my letter, and I know some other people got my letter, so I'll kind of just make it brief. But I just want to make sure that we can hopefully get that on the board, that there is some consideration for the importance of keeping our downtown area healthy, especially, you know, so many of the commercial properties either going residential or going or being used outside of something residential. So it is a real concern. I think, you know, our downtown's important to the community, and I think would be well worth the consideration.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Christina Wilcox, 24 Rear King Street. I'm here for the same reason. I wanted to make sure that the town is paying some attention to the number of properties that are being turned over into residential in the downtown area. I have a business on Bearskin Neck. We also have a location on Broadway right next to the House of Pizza. We own Rockport Candle Company. And on Bearskin Neck, since that's where the majority of my business is, I think it would be a huge detriment to the town to see a lot of those retail businesses and restaurants turned over into residential, because it's less of a draw for people to come here. And as far as I can see, tourism is still a massive part of this town's survival and income. And if we keep minimizing the number of businesses that can function down there and draw the tourists, then I don't know what else we have to go on, what else we can survive on. So I think that that's important to take a look at. And I didn't have time to write a letter or send an email, but I can if that's helpful. But thank you for letting us speak about this.
You're welcome. And we did, by the way, we did get a number of emails. Some of them kind of reflect what you've said, Ms. Wilcox. And all the emails that were received have been distributed to all the board members, and I'm assuming they've read them. So we're aware of the content of those emails. Okay. Anyone?
And I do apologize, it's my daughter's birthday, so I have to scoot, but thank you again for the opportunity
okay.
to have a voice.
Thank you.
So, thank you for coming.
Any other public comments? No other public comments.
Thank you, Dan, for coming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move to the minutes. We have actually 2 sets of minutes to approve. The minutes of October 3rd and the minutes of October 17. And the reason the minutes of October 3rd were not approved at the last meeting is because we only had 3 members, and I guess one of them wasn't present at the October, Herm wasn't present at the October 3rd meeting. So anyway, we have to take a look at those and any comments, changes, and then vote on whether to approve them. And also the minutes for the last meeting, which was October 17. So has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? I know Mary sent them by email, but that may not have been read. In any event, unless anyone wants any more time, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the October 3, 2019 minutes as they are written?
So moved.
Motion by Hank, second to the motion.
Second.
Second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the October 3rd minutes are approved. Let's move to the October 17 minutes. Are there any deletions, additions, changes to those minutes does anyone have?
I have one minor correction.
Okay,
Page 2, under 5C near the bottom, talking about the sewers. It says infiltration is a big part. It should be inflow and infiltration. That's the technical term.
so this is the middle of that paragraph? So inflow,
And infiltration. So just
Okay.
add 2 words, inflow and, in front of infiltration.
okay. Anything else, Tom?
Nope.
Any other comments?
Yes, with regard to comments pertaining to what is referred to with regard to fences in the town bylaws, and with what I mentioned was a part of the state statutes. It does not reference the state statutes as including well, all of the others, walls, berms.
Where are
Fences.
you referring to, Herm?
I'm referring to that, let's see, I have it all marked out here, but.
Yeah, it says that the bylaws.
So at the bottom
define-
of page 3,
Okay,
um,
I remember this
is
discussion.
Tony or Toby saying,
Said that
hedges
the
not
old-
included in any of the bylaws, and I said, yes, they were. And then I also said that hedges, or that fences refers to a variety of things listed in the state statutes, berms, fences, hedges, anything that offers essentially an obstacle to view. So that
So
should be included
When
too.
you say the state statute, you mean the building code?
No, state statute,
Well, which statute, do you know offhand?
yeah, I do. If I can find my reference to it. Chapter 49, section 2.
Okay. 49,
Would that
section 2.
For everyone who wants one.
There we go. Come
Oh, that's
Coming
nice.
down the way.
one more.
We're all getting a copy?
All right.
Terrific.
So, that needs to be included, that reference, because I did reference the state statute without referencing the actual
Yeah,
citation. I referenced the statute.
right. Well, I remember this was part of a discussion that you were having with Toby about whether the town's law applied to hedges.
Right.
And although you're correct that it does, on the other hand, I'm thinking maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to expressly state that in the town law, so then people don't have to go to the state
That
law.
may be, that
you
may
know,
be true.
So
And
that's just a thought.
Yeah, no.
Okay,
All right.
that will be made. Any other?
Okay. Yeah, one other point, and that was that we did have a discussion about getting items on the agenda. And I take issue with the fact that you're saying you're the only one who can put something on the agenda. I don't see where that's appropriate at all. Never a rule that I practiced or ever practiced on any board that I've ever served as chair on or any member of. And therefore, I do take issue with that. And I wanted that referenced in here because you were taking the position that you had the right to put agenda items on, and I was saying, no, that's not appropriate.
Yeah, that really isn't my position, if
Well,
that's
what's
what
your
you
position?
understood. Well, my
What is it?
position, no, it's really, any planning board member can request that something be on the agenda, and it will go on the agenda. It's just a matter of when.
No, I said, but I asked specifically for the next meeting because of the very topic that was brought up this evening.
Well, my recollection is that you wanted to have a forum.
That was
That's-
only part of it, but it was
that's-
not at this meeting.
That's
No,
what you wanted.
That was not the whole discussion. Discussion included a forum at some point.
Yeah.
But that it should be brought up as an agenda item so that the town knows that it is something we are going to discuss, not something that I then have to go around and start by notifying members of the town, i.e. the shop owners and the like, whether it's real estate agents included or lawyers, that we are going to discuss something and then have them come in. So in the future, I would like it to be understood that a member of the board can in fact list an item on the agenda by virtue of saying it's appropriate to have this item on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I think maybe it was a miscommunication, but I understood you to say that we needed to have a public
No.
forum.
No,
and-
no.
And I think you did say that.
But that was
well, maybe
part
it-
of the discussion. If we
Maybe
were to
you
go back
can,
and,
maybe you can let me finish.
Okay,
Because
I
I don't
can.
think we're talking about, I don't think we're talking at odds. What the way that items get on the agenda is the same way they've gotten on the agenda before, which is if a planning board member wants to put an item on the agenda, they can request that it be put on the agenda, and as long as it's, the week before,
and that's what I did.
it'll go on the agenda. But what I recall our
was
conversation,
not.
and I don't think we need to,
But you're
belabor
confusing the
this.
two, and I want you to admit that it should have been put on the agenda for this week, even though people came, and I did go around to town, and I did alert people to the fact, and they have come in the form of emails and memos and
which
spoken.
I've circulated to everybody.
And that's good.
Yeah.
But the fact remains is that I did not appreciate the fact you cut me off at the last meeting and would not let that be the item on the agenda, and it had nothing to do with the forum.
Well, I don't recall, my recollection of what happened isn't the same as yours, so let's move on. I've stated what I think is my policy for items on the agenda.
So
and
we
that
can
will
bring it up and
And
it
that
will
will
be included.
continue to be the policy. And we did get all these communications, which I've shared with all the members of the board, and there'll obviously be further discussion in the future on this issue, and you'll certainly be able to participate.
All right, I think we ought to
Okay.
discuss it later on under
Well, we
member
can just,
member issues.
we can just, to a point, we can discuss it under member issues, but it isn't on the agenda, and we've got, many, many meetings to come, and
Well,
this
then
is
I'd like to put it on the agenda for next time.
fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, getting, all that being said, we were on the October 17 minutes. Does anybody have any changes, additions, deletions? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes as is?
Move to approve as amended.
As amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, the motion was made by Tom. I need a second, I'm sorry.
I'll second it with the
Okay.
amendments. that
Herm
we've
seconds
discussed.
with as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You weren't here,
Weren't here,
so,
no,
right,
okay, yeah.
so, okay. Oh, no, 11. Okay, so, next item on the agenda is the old business. Now, I do recall you, Herm, saying that you were going to hand out a revision of the TOD. I didn't get one. I don't know if you did.
No, I haven't handed out,
Okay.
the revision that you have from a month ago, we'll say, whatever that meeting date was, is the revision as it stands. I've been in discussion by email with Chris, and he's willing to help me make further adjustments to it. And then I will submit that revised edition for discussion by the board. I don't know whether that will be ready for the next meeting or not. I'll work towards it. If it is, then we can, or I'll ask to put that on the agenda too, but for the moment, we're not quite ready.
Okay. All right, so that was the item of old business.
Wait,
and-
can I,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom, you first. So my question on this is, should we wait for this new revision, Herman, do you think? Or should we start the process of getting this going with the public meeting and all that stuff?
Well, we're certainly pretty close to trying to, have a public meeting on it. Whether we have a public meeting before Christmas or after Christmas is always the issue. Let me then work towards having a revision for the next meeting, and at that point, we can make a decision about the public meeting.
Okay,
Does
so
that work?
then we want that as an agenda item, is that correct?
Yeah, or you put it on as an agenda item, and Chris and I will have something.
Okay,
This will be for the meeting at this month in November?
Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, okay.
thank you.
Jason,
Yes.
just a comment about zoning for that general area. You know, by having attended the zoning board of appeals meeting,
Yep.
that there was a use variance granted for a building in that zone
Right.
because they wanted a movie theater, which was not allowed, although a blacksmith would have been allowed. So
Right.
clearly this needs some revision for that area.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting twist that happened at the ZBA, that they permitted a movie theater smack in the middle of the area that would be covered by the TOD. But, they did grant a use variance because the property has been unused apparently for a couple of years, so, and it looks like it's going forward. Okay, well, that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting, and before that, you'll have maybe some kind of revision that you're working on with
Yeah,
Chris?
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah, well,
good. All right.
Yep.
New business. Tom, you had asked that this be put on, a planning board liaison for the MAPC. You want to elaborate a little more on that?
I guess for quite some time, Ed Hand had been serving as our liaison. And I think he continued even after his term on the planning board expired. And now I understand he has submitted the resignation and the town needs to appoint a replacement. And I think we said at the last meeting, ideally it would be someone from the planning board.
Now, do you know what the functions of that liaison are?
It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, the way Ed Hand describes it. They have a lot of things that they're involved with. There's not just planning and zoning issues, but they do energy management stuff and all sorts of other issues that can help a town with managing its affairs.
Okay. So so you're basically saying you're asking now, are we asking whether someone on the planning board wants to take this on? I guess it doesn't have to be someone on the planning board, but ideally,
I think it would be the selectmen that appoint the representative.
but we'd make a
I
recommendation
would
or?
assume they would give a
Yeah, of
priority to
course.
someone from the planning
Yeah.
board who wanted
Yeah.
to do it, and so that's why I brought it up.
Okay, well, here
They
we are.
also- They also do traffic,
Yes,
this is traffic guys.
yeah, I
That's-
remember Ed talking about that one time.
Yeah, yeah.
Ed basically said if you wanted to, it could almost be a full-time job, they got so much going
Yeah.
on.
That's what
Probably
paid me to
could
do
be.
it.
If you want to restrict yourself to just the zoning aspects of
Look,
it.
you
then
can
could-
probably do as much or as
Yeah,
little as
right.
you want.
Right.
I'm just guessing that's the way it
Right.
works, so. Are you interested, Hank, or you just,
Yeah, I could do that. Do I get paid to go into Boston? Do I get mileage?
Why wouldn't you?
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'm serious, why wouldn't you?
Well, you may be, but I don't know, Good question.
If we had a budget that included.
Paid by whom?
The town, why wouldn't they?
I think
would
what
be
you do,
happy.
I think what you do
mean, the
is,
town-
in fact, we do it, and then we generate a cost associated with a need, and then we go in for additional funds, which are always there, and put it on the budget, put that item on the budget for next year after a purpose or an absolute need has been determined, and Hank will be the proof.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, there's no reason why Hank should use his own money to go to a meeting that has to do with the town.
The town makes out huge
Right.
on the grants and things like
No,
that.
I know.
It's well
There's
worth the
absolutely
investment.
none. So
Submit it,
yeah,
see what happens.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd be happy to be.
Okay.
Guinea pig.
There's a
So,
great limousine service, Hank.
I could go by train, I'm not.
So
I get a-
nominate Hank
I get a
Best
senior
to be our
discount.
liaison to the planning board, to the MAPC.
okay.
We need to.
For our
elect him?
recommendation, you mean?
Recommendation.
We don't assign it,
Yeah.
the selectmen do.
The motion is to recommend Hank Betts to be the MAPC liaison, to recommend that
For the town
to
of
the
Rockport.
town to the Board of Selectmen.
So moved.
Okay.
I actually do know a lot about railroads and stuff, from my past.
From your past
Yeah.
railroad days?
That's life.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Anybody want to second it?
I will second that.
Okay, motion seconded. Any discussion? Thank you for offering to do that, Hank.
Welcome, my pleasure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I'll communicate with the,
Thank you.
Mitch Vieira and say that you're the man and that you need to be appointed. Okay? Very good, thank you. Okay, next item of business. This is, I kind of went through the zoning law and the part that's the issue of the setbacks, and I did a little revision. This is on page 18 of the current zoning law. Actually, it's on 2 pages, because one is the definition of gross floor area on page 3, and then the second one is on page 18, which ties into the definition of gross floor area. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read this.
No.
If
And
you
I
haven't,
propose-
then we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. And we'll discuss it then. Okay?
Fine.
The ol-
Is it
the
Unless
only-
someone else has any comments at this
No,
point.
I just had a question,
Mhm.
and this is, I should have looked at it closer before I came here tonight, I apologize. But my memory is that there's essentially 2 different definitions for gross floor area.
I looked it up, and Terry, and there was one definition, in the definitions, they define
Right.
gross floor area.
Okay.
And then, and then you go back to this,
Yeah.
which on page 18 is the section that we're talking about, section 11, and it starts talking about gross floor area under 11C,
Yes.
but there's no real definition separate from the one that's on page 3. So
Right.
I took the one that's on page 3, and I used that, that's
Yeah,
gonna be the
that's-
one that's
yeah.
gonna be referenced on page 18.
That's not how we defined it for,
Well-
when we were talking. We were not
We were-
excluding anything.
No, we weren't excluding anything.
We weren't excluding a darn thing.
No.
We looked at the gross plane view of the buildings.
Okay, well, that's why I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify that,
yeah.
because
This is,
Within the
you
walls,
have,
without deduction for, why do
he's
you?
talking about living area.
well,
No.
that's another thing I wanted to ask about too, but I did, with the gross floor area, we have gross floor area, and then we have living space
Yeah,
and non-living space.
right.
So, which sounds to me that living space is different from gross floor area. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
This is where you have 7 foot
This
is
is where
the
it's-
highest
that-
point.
Right, I mean, if you've got an
All that
attic
stuff. Yeah,
with 6.5-foot ceilings,
right, or a
you don't
basement.
use that in the
Right.
gross floor area
Right.
calculation, right?
Right.
Right,
Okay,
livable
if you,
area.
if you have a basement, does that include it in the gross floor area?
Not for,
Well, gross floor area, if it's living space, it's included. If it isn't living space, then it isn't included.
Right, but how do you
I mean, it depends upon what you
necessarily-
call a
How
basement.
do you necessarily know
Yeah.
that?
And this is where I think there's been some confusion, because
Well, there has been.
because whenever the original this is my interpretation, I have no factual data, but just in thinking about it, the gross floor area, and with the basements as defined, meant a basement that was below ground.
right.
But
Right.
now we have a lot of basements that are actually on one side of the property because of the
Right. Right.
topography.
In their living space.
Yeah, but then on the other side of the property, it is now wide open.
Yeah.
And the problem we were having when we were doing the side setbacks and everything is, when it's open, in other words, the basement would be partially above ground, above the ground plane. That now adds to the mass of the viewing mass that we're looking at.
Right.
And that's why I thought, back when we first did it, I thought we were gonna try to tackle this issue of basement, meaning subterranean basement, because this gross floor area, as you have it under, well, on page 3, includes attic space, which we would consider because that is mass that we're looking at,
Right.
as opposed to living space. If it's less than 7 feet, it's not considered living space.
Well, you know, here's, if we can just go back to the, let's go back.
Well, we don't have to do the whole thing tonight.
No, no,
I'm
I just
saying
want,
this is-
I want to work on this, I want to
Yeah.
be able to work on it more, so I want to
Yeah.
get direction here from the rest of the board. I'm looking at page 3,
Right,
because it is confusing.
yeah,
The gross floor area, which is defined, it's the only place that I found that it's defined in the zoning bylaw.
Yes, sir.
It says,
It is.
and it says, the floor area within the perimeter of the outside walls of the buildings under consideration without deduction for hallways, stairs, closets, thickness of walls, columns, or other features. Period. That was amended in 2003. It says nothing about, you know, attics with less than 7-foot
No.
ceilings. It says,
Right.
Well, elsewhere it does,
On page 18, there's
Okay.
a note.
doesn't it?
right.
It mentions gross area, not gross floor area, gross area, and then it defines non-living space.
correct.
Okay, but here's the problem with this, the way it's written now, and I don't think anybody can say that this is clear, is that, first of all, rather than just the way it's framed, rather than put it in a note, I mean, it's not a note, it's not a footnote, it is part of the bylaw. So if we're saying that, okay, when we're gonna further define gross floor area to include attic spaces and living spaces without going further, that are, I'm sorry, attic spaces and basements that are living spaces. I mean, in other
Above
words,
7 feet.
if you can live there, I guess someone could live there with less than 7 feet, but
But-
anyway.
But
If
that
you-
wasn't really the intent of the basement area, because if the basement was truly below ground, and that's the way people wanted it, we weren't gonna count that, because that wasn't adding to the volume.
No.
It was only, the rub is, as Terry is alluding, is with regard to the assessors situation. So if it's over 7 feet in the basement, then they're seeing it as potential living space. So some people have made their basements less than
Some
7
people
feet.
some people make their
Yeah. less.
surface basements living spaces.
Yeah, but they make it less than 7
But
feet
I
to
don't wanna-
avoid the
I mean,
tax.
let's not mix,
Well, I mean,
what
it's
we're
part,
doing with
it's
the
part of the, it's
assessments.
part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And you can't, for the moment anyway, separate the way the assessors look at it from the way the building code looks at it, or the way this zoning bylaw looks at it. So anyway, we did not include a basement that was a true basement, whether there was living space or not, in the bulk calculation, the gross floor area. It was only that which was above. The rub is whether or not you include attic space as gross floor area. And the only way we really settled on that was to say if it was above 7 feet, then in fact it was considered, whether it was developed or not, it was still considered
Okay.
to be part of the bulk.
so let's get back to what I drafted here then. Because it's from what I'm hearing you say, Herm, this isn't actually too far off from what I think the intention is. And the last sentence says basements, and maybe it should say subsurface basements, or something to that effect, and then attic space with a ceiling height of no more than 7 feet at its highest point are excluded from the gross floor area calculation.
It's true, except with regard to site plan reviews, where in fact we do consider the basement area, the living space in the basement area as part of the gross floor calculation. Because that truly is then part of the way we view site plan reviews. House
Right,
comes
but
over,
what about,
over,
what about the, you know, I'm looking at it in terms of defining figuring out the gross floor area to finding these setbacks, which is.
True, but you
which is-
can't, you've got to watch the definition of gross floor area, because
Right.
gross floor area with regard to site plan review for a 6,000 square foot home does include living space in the basement.
Okay, that's for site plan review.
That's true.
Correct.
But when we're talking about the setback calculation, it does include it.
That's correct.
That's
Okay,
correct.
So, okay, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
No,
That's
but,
different.
but what Herman's saying is exactly my point, is that if somebody just reads the definitions,
Yeah.
and now you're gonna apply, whether you apply for site plan review, it becomes very confusing. So I always felt that we needed to somehow separate out
Yeah.
the terminology or the definition,
Yeah.
and
So that-
change the
that-
words
yeah.
or do whatever to make it a little clearer, like,
Well, right.
yeah.
So what we could do is, if we're treating it differently in site plan review from setback calculation, is to, in the site plan review section, is to have its own definition, and in this setback calculation, have its
But see,
definition.
right now, you've got one definition of gross floor
And
area
that
which
would make-
stands up.
Then we would have three definitions.
Gross definition of gross floor area, where it is, stands up for both. Except that, in the site plan review, it includes basements, to include basements, and in the setbacks, it does not include basement, and it does not include
7 feet.
attic space less than 7 feet.
Okay.
So I mean, that's where you put the change. You put the
Yeah.
change, and that's what the note says. The note says for the computations. So it's already there in
Yeah,
one
but
sense of the word.
it's, listen, the fact that we've spent 15 minutes talking about it.
No, but
it's not-
no, but part of it's
You
bringing
said-
your educational level up to
Your-
where
yeah,
we
yeah,
were.
your
We did this for months. This is not new to us.
No, I
So,
understand.
so
that.
don't, but the point is that because you want to change it, doesn't mean that all of this wasn't considered before.
No.
Wait a minute,
You're
wait a
not,
minute, wait a minute.
no,
Herman,
wait, let me just say
Okay.
something.
All
I don't want to change it, Herm. I want to, I've been trying to understand what the intent is here.
Yeah.
And to write it in a way that maybe will make it a little clearer,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
change it.
Okay?
So it's not bringing me up to education. It's understanding what you and the other members of the board who were here were intending to do when you did this, and try to express it in a way that maybe makes it a little clearer, and take it out of a footnote. And if there's a need to have
A third
a
definition.
different,
It's really
a
third
different definition, or change this definition, then fine, then we'll do that. This is a
Yeah,
working
but-
process. It's not an insult to you
No, it's not. and
or
that-
anybody else who's on the planning board who worked on this. I'm trying to straighten something out.
But the
That's all.
definition for the gross floor area applies. It applies to both. And the differences we have discussed.
Yeah.
But the definition applies. So to change it in the definition area, or to have 3 definitions for gross floor area, that isn't gonna be helpful.
I
Okay,
don't
hold
think
on,
we need
hold on,
3.
Hold on, I have to tell you something, Herman. This is not Jason saying anything about changing it, this is me saying it. And the reason I brought it up, and I brought it up many times before, is that I have heard from many, many people that this is a confusing situation when you have the definition here, and then you have to go to the notes or the footnotes to see what applies or what doesn't apply. So I'm asking other people to take a look at this and see if we can simplify it for the normal person to read it. And I've said it before. It's not, and I agreed with everything that we did when we did it. This is afterwards, because I understood what was going on, because we talked about it so much. This is afterwards from feedback from people saying it to me, saying this is confusing, it doesn't make sense. Can you guys fix this?
So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here. That's why I sent around this draft, is to try to fix it. And if it needs more work, great. If there's some input that you or anybody else can give on this, great. So let's try to work together instead of, you know.
But if it
That's all.
can't be done, or it can't be done more simply, or if it can't be simplified, then we just leave it the way it is, that's all.
Yeah, I think it can be.
But I think there's a lot of smart people here. I think we can at least
I
take a
think
look
it
at it
can
and
be.
think about it.
Yeah, okay. So let me do this. I'll work on this a little more. This is just a draft. And the other thing I did on page 18 was I made it crystal clear that, when you calculate gross floor area, you include not only new construction, you also include existing buildings to make that calculation. And, you know, I think our town council reviewed this for us. She said expressly that this section lacked clarity and needed to be revised. I think we should take her opinion and attempt to revise it to avoid things happening that we don't want to happen in the future. That's all.
For the moment, however, because it's going to take a while to revise this. For the moment, she did say that with regard to new construction, there seemed to be no confusion.
Right, for new construction.
therefore,
You
we have
said the
to-
building under consideration, but the problem was, and if there's an existing building, and we've run into this before, if there's an existing structure, and they then put on an accessory building, and if you don't add the two, then you're basically accomplishing, the property owner is doing exactly what I don't think we want them to do, which is to take a large square footage house and separating that off from the garage or other accessory structure. So
So-
that's why, that's what I intended to do here. But again, you
Sure.
haven't seen it, so take a
Okay.
look at it.
So
and
there,
discuss
so
it at the
therefore, we
next
do
meeting.
have a ruling at the moment for new construction.
For new construction.
For new
For new
construction. And
construction,
that applies,
we
to
have-
that applies to
we
51
said
Marmion
we
Way.
have it-
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
the,
right.
the,
All right.
the difference would
That's
be, Herman, is that last, piece, and I couldn't agree more. The last, Jason has it as, page 18, 411, C3. The very last paragraph there. Determining minimum site setbacks under the section, gross floor area of pre-existing residential building shall be aggregated with the gross floor area
Right.
of the proposed accessory
Right.
building.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's,
All right.
that's what we're discussing.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's really the main
yeah.
part
Right.
of it. And then the other thing, which is the paragraphs 1 and 2, the second sentence of those paragraphs addresses what the building inspector did with 51 Marmion in a very direct way. And so, but anyway, okay, we'll
Back-
talk about that next
yeah.
time. I'll work on the
Back,
other.
back on your gross floor area, just for a second.
Sure.
If you could have that definition, then you say, there are two, you could add something like, there are two exceptions. Site plan review, whatever that says.
Right.
And a gross floor area for whatever this one.
You mean put it in where the definition
Put it
is?
in with the definition.
Yeah, we could do that. That's actually a
That
good way
might-
of doing it.
That might be a way
It's just
around all
Right.
of this.
easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is good, and.
No,
Two separate.
Again, I'm not trying to change something
Yeah,
unless
right,
it
yeah.
simplifies it.
Well, you know, Hank, that's what a lot of laws do. They'll
Yeah.
define and they'll say, however, this doesn't apply to X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
or except this, or
Yeah.
something, so
Yeah.
people know.
And it's
So-
right there.
But you have it in one place. See,
Yeah,
that's my
exactly.
preference,
Yeah.
have it in one
Yep,
place.
yeah.
One definition, all in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
right.
Next item, we'll work on that more. Next item of business. I think it's your.
Yeah, it's the letter and the discussion.
Yeah.
So the letter's been written. The letter is, as far as I know, essentially been approved by everybody. The only change
Yeah, there,
that I have with regard to that is to say that the members of the planning board are requesting, which is the beginning of the third paragraph, instead of I and so, it's now the members of the planning board are requesting that the Board of Selectmen remind.
you know, Hank and I were at the meeting, just so you know, I don't know if you were here when we discussed that. We were at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, this issue came up, and the Board of Selectmen, the question that Sarah Wilkinson asked was, well, did they get is there a building permit issued already? And the answer is yes. And that seemed to take any interest away. It's not, and Hank even pushed the issue a little more and got some pushback from the board. So bottom line is, they, from my reading, and maybe yours too, is that they're not You're not interested in this.
Yeah, I understand
So,
that.
okay.
But there's a paragraph that I wrote mentally, and that's that, if in fact the statement of the board is to apply to all future situations, that essentially means that no one is reviewing the actions of the building inspector, that in fact any mistake the building inspector makes that is sanctified by virtue of a building permit or whatever else goes after it becomes a stamp of approval. Therefore, there is no way to review what he does because he sends nothing to the zoning board of appeals or to the planning board. He may send his decisions to a copy of it to the board of selectmen, but he doesn't send it to us. So therefore, I disapprove of the current situation, which does not, everybody else is subject to some sort of review, and essentially what we're saying is he's not subject to review, and further, his decisions cannot be reversed. That's wrong.
You know,
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I've seen a lot of building inspectors in a lot of towns and a lot of cities and a lot of villages. There is no one who reviews the decisions of a building inspector.
Right.
Period. The building inspector issues a permit. If a neighbor doesn't like it, the neighbor can sue.
Right.
If a building inspector is lax in his enforcement of the building code or the zoning law, the body that hires him can remind him of that and, shape up a little more. But there is no
Yeah.
review of a building inspector's issuance of a building permit. There is, the next step, if you're gonna challenge that, is you go to court, and that's the way it is.
Well,
But
maybe
that-
that's what we should do.
Well, I don't think so. I
I-
don't think we should be reviewing
No,
a building anybody should be
I don't think we
reviewing
need
it.
to
I think
review
we need a
his
good
thing,
building
but
inspector.
in this case, because this sets a very bad precedent.
It does.
Absolutely.
This is my problem. It's not the one building permit, and it's not Paul, I like Paul a lot, but to have this particular thing, which literally spits in the face of the town meeting vote, to me is quite serious, and I really would consider the planning board, or if not the
Right.
planning board, I'll just do it myself, suing about this. If there is no other alternative.
Well, there
And that's
isn't,
what you're
and
telling me.
you can do that, but your suit will probably be thrown out of court
Well,
because
maybe.
because the only people who can sue for this are the people whose property is directly and adversely affected by it.
Well,
I'm
maybe
not-
if
I'm
they
not-
knew about this
So,
going on, they would.
Well, I don't know, maybe they should be paying attention, who knows?
No, but the thing of it
well,
is
we're
nobody, no, but this is important. It's not any, don't cut it off. We do not know when a planning, when a building inspector issues a permit. No one does.
That's right.
And therefore, there's no beginning date, and there's no date by which something must be addressed before it becomes fait accompli. And when in fact there's nothing in the ground, that's not fait accompli. It can be reversed.
Right.
When it gets to be a form in the ground, or it gets to be a foundation, when it gets to be a sidewall, then all of a sudden you get a different kind of issue. But to back away from it just because the building
We shouldn't
permit
do
has
that.
been issued is not correct.
Well, I don't think anybody's arguing,
Well,
to
see,
do-
what.
Well, let me just finish. I don't think anybody's arguing to back away from anything. I think this letter is fine if we want to remind the town we want to let the selectmen remind them to enforce the laws, we can do that. But the point is that I'm stating what the state of the law is, and that's what the state of the law is. And as upset as someone might get about the building inspector's decision, that's the state of the law. We do not have a remedy. So let's talk about this letter, because there's actually an error in here that
Well, let me
needs
talk,
to be
let me
corrected.
just answer
Yeah.
what you said. I hear your words, all good legal words. The problem that we have as a planning board is we don't have the same power the Board of Appeals had. Board of Appeals at 5 Penzance Road, they built this house, and they built it too close to the front, and it was there, and finally, there was enough momentum in town, the Board of Appeals made them tear down part of the house. And which was fine. And they did the right thing, the correct thing. And they had a room full, the community house was full of people just ready to have everyone, by whatever, strip the hide off them, they straighten that out. We don't have any authority for anything, and we have no way to say anything about this, about the job performance or whatever happens with the planning inspector. And I know other towns don't have it either. The guy in Beverly, who used to be the legal guy, said, I tried to get a job going around saying, this is all the stuff that they're letting go by that we've already said couldn't happen, and it goes on. And no town wants to deal with us because it's too hard. But I think this is a major issue. He let this thing go. And to say that he didn't know how this was written is not correct.
Well,
And
if he was confused, though, he should have sought out.
he should sort us
Well,
out.
apparently it wasn't. That's what he said.
Well,
I
no,
asked him about
baloney.
it.
He
But
never,
he-
he
look,
never liked this. He never liked this. He never liked that lighting bylaw. Who knows what he's doing with that? And we should at least call attention to that. I think is it a fiduciary? Is that the right word? You know the legal. That's a fiduciary responsibility.
Well, we don't really have a fiduciary
Whatever.
responsibility.
We've
Well,
got some
but-
kind of
But
responsibility.
listen, I think we're all on the same page, not to beat this to death. We're all on the same page with the letter. Everyone agrees with this. I think, they're good building inspectors, and they're building inspectors who aren't so good. They're building
I'm not saying
inspectors
he's not
who, well, if he's not enforcing the law,
No, it's a
when he
choice.
issues a permit, that's something that he needs to do. That's his job. And maybe if the Board of Selectmen gets enough feedback from everybody, then maybe they'll start looking at his job performance. But, and there are also building inspectors, and I've seen them too, who are such sticklers, who enforce it down to
Oh,
the
yeah.
T, that people complain about them.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're
Right.
they're too rigid. So that's the other side of the coin. As far as the letter goes,
Yeah.
the one thing that's an error here, and I will sign this on behalf of the planning board.
Am I gonna write your letters, or are you gonna write your letters?
Oh, I don't know. I
What-
mean, what's the problem, Herm?
The problem is, I wrote the letter. You
Yeah.
didn't wanna write the letter.
No, it's not that he didn't want to write the letter. I wanted to talk to the Board of Selectmen.
You
which
talked
we
with them, and
did.
I wrote the letter post,
Okay,
ipso facto.
so do you feel hurt if your name doesn't go
No,
on
it's
the
just that
letter?
you were not so inclined at the last meeting to do this. And I said I would write the
But
letter.
guess what? I'm listening to you, board members.
Fine.
And I'm hearing that the board members want to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
I am one board member, even though I'm the chairman, I'm one. When I hear my 4 fellow board members saying they want to do this, I'm going to do it, because we're the board as a body, and there are 4 of you.
Then
And
that's
there's
good.
one of me. But this is the consensus of the board. So does that answer your question?
Well, it doesn't. But the
Okay.
fact remains is, yes, it can be your letter. I don't care about that as much as I care about the fact that initially you weren't interested in writing a
Right,
letter.
and you know what, I might not be now either, but I will do it,
sure that-
and because 4 of the board members want to send this letter, and 1 maybe doesn't, but that's okay.
What do you mean by that? Who's the
Well,
maybe he
because-
doesn't?
He's saying it's not gonna go anywhere.
I don't think it's
so-
gonna go
that
anywhere,
doesn't
but
matter.
but
So-
I'll be happy to send the letter, that's
So
all my,
I'm fully in favor of it. I wrote
well,
it.
I know you are,
So,
fine. I'm
Gentlemen-
just saying it's not
gentlemen-
gonna go
gentlemen.
anywhere. Yeah,
Okay.
All right.
Herman, if you want to write this letter and put your own name
no,
on
I
it,
don't.
you go ahead and do it.
It's not the point.
Well
The
then,
point-
whatever the point is, it's not that important.
It
Can we just
isn't.
get to what the correction is and move
yeah,
on?
let
What
me
is
read
the
the
correction?
because actually that would be the worst thing, is to have an error in the
What is
file.
the correction?
It's actually, the side setback for the garage is actually 10 feet, not 15. It's 10.
You mean currently,
51 Marmion Way is 10 feet, yeah.
and it should be,
The plans that he has show a 10-foot setback. So the garage is only 10 feet, and it should be 20, right?
Well, it says it should be 20. I think what you're saying is that the concern of the side side setback for the garage, 51 Marbury Way, is 10 feet, because that's the way he set it up as an accessory building? Is that the way
That's,
he?
if you look at the plan that was submitted for the building permit, it's got a 10-foot setback from the side lot line.
Okay,
it's
then
not
then
15.
the 15 should be set as 10.
Correct.
Okay, that's fine.
So I will, I'll draft a letter,
I'll send you this, okay?
yeah, fine.
this is what you're
Well,
gonna send.
You can send it to me, I can write it in about 5 minutes, but go ahead. You have it in Word,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
assuming?
it's, all you have to do is copy it, block copy
Right,
it,
right.
right? Or are you gonna rewrite it? That is your letter.
No, I'll see. I mean, I'm not gonna change any substance of it. I might change some punctuation, but other than that.
Punctuation's correct, believe me.
Yeah,
Anyway.
let's,
I'd like
let's,
to
Let's
give-
go on, let's move
I-
on.
I would-
Does everyone want to send this?
Listen,
Let's let's
yeah.
take a vote,
so
okay?
can we take the vote of this, to change this letter, no changes, except for 10 feet where it says 15 feet that we just discussed, and the second paragraph that starts, I, Tom Minkus, and Hank Betts, of the planning board, eliminate those names
Yeah.
and the word of, and put the planning board
Right.
is requesting that the Board of Selectmen and the rest of it. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, why don't I do this?
You
Let
have a
me
pen for
do a draft. Why don't you send it to me? I'll do a draft of it.
What's your problem with the letter?
I don't have any problem with the letter, but
Well,
I want to,
Can we not act on the motion?
no, because what Terry said is no changes, and
No,
what
he
I
didn't
said is
say-
I might,
He
I
didn't
think he did say
That's,
that.
well, it's true.
But
then
he
leave it
did,
alone.
Planning
you know
board
what, you gotta let me finish, Herm. Stop interrupting
is
me, please.
requesting.
He said no changes, and I said I might make some changes in punctuation or something like that, but the substance of the letter will be exactly the same. That's what I'm comfortable doing. I hope
What are
everybody
the
else would be
punctuation
comfortable.
changes you want to change?
Well, when I sit down and look at it and read it, I usually do that in the quiet of my own home, and I can make some, maybe I'll make some punctuation changes, maybe I won't. I'm not sure.
I think that's
But
fine.
why don't you just let me try that? And,
Why don't you accept it as it is?
okay. Does anybody want to make a motion that, do you want to send the letter?
We have a motion on the table.
I know,
the
we do,
motion's
but
on the
Has there
table.
been a second?
Yes,
Yes, Tom
seconded it.
seconded
Okay,
it.
Tom seconded the motion. Now we have discussion. What my suggestion was is that the motion be amended so I can, if I make any punctuation changes, I can make those, but the substance of the letter, the intent of the letter, the language of the letter will stay the same.
I think that's a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
He said language, I say language. Language stays the same? Fine.
Yes, okay? Would that be acceptable with that
Well,
amendment?
It's Terry's
Yeah,
motion.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
And I'd like to further, just make a comment. I think this letter needs to come out because the designers, I'm really not very happy with the design company who put this project together. They're supposed to know the bylaws too,
Well,
and they obviously are trying to get around it for some reason. They need to get a message also, and this letter helps.
okay, but
Somehow it does.
let's do this motion.
Yeah,
There's a motion with an amendment. Is there a second to the motion?
yeah, we did it, that's what Tom.
Well, Tom seconded it, and then we had a discussion.
I seconded the original motion, and there was an
I
amendment.
proposed an
Amendment?
amendment,
I'll
and you
second.
said the amendment was okay to your motion.
So I'll
Yes.
second your amendment to the
Okay.
motion.
There's
So,
discussion on that, as long as the language stays the same, as we agreed.
okay.
Okay? I'll vote for that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
So then the motion that's on the table is to send it as is. First, there's an amendment to the
With the
motion.
motion, with
Now we
the
have a motion.
amendment,
Now we have a motion to have you send it under your name.
right?
So we
And I
have to
was
vote
gonna-
on that.
The motion was the amended motion for punctuation changes, but the substance of the letter stay
Right.
the same. That was seconded, and I think that's what we voted on.
That's
Correct.
correct. But we haven't
Okay.
voted on the first
Well,
motion.
it was a friendly amendment, so I assume that covered the original motion too.
I don't understand. I
The-
thought you still had to vote, you have to vote on the motion
If the
to
person who
amend?
made the original motion accepts it as a friendly amendment, do we still need to vote on the amendment to
I
the
don't-
motion?
No, I think that covers the whole thing.
Yeah.
Friendly amendment. I
Okay,
have to look
so-
that one up.
So this was let me just state so the stenographer can understand what the heck's going on here. The original motion was made by Terry, right?
Correct.
The seconded was made, Tom, did you second
Yes, I
it?
did.
Yes.
We had discussion. I proposed an amendment.
Yep.
Terry accepted that amendment, and you seconded the motion
Okay. so
with
we
the
vote-
amendment,
we vote on that.
and then we voted on that,
So
all
that-
right?
that
Now
votes
we
on
just
the
voted
amendment.
on that,
So we
okay.
vote on the amendment.
We voted on the amendment to it, but we didn't vote on the original.
We probably
motion.
should vote again on
You
the.
should vote on the
an
original motion.
amended motion, then.
Okay, that's what I was,
I think you're right.
All those in
Okay, so-
favor?
on the
Aye.
amended motion, aye, opposed, motion carried, okay. Anything else? All right, there are a couple of, member items that Tom and I went to, because I think this is something that the board should know about. We went to the, zoning board of appeals meeting, where there was an issue concerning, a request for a variance for a fence. And, from 4 feet, it was a 4-foot fence, and the application was to request a variance for a 7-foot fence. It was a side yard fence, it wasn't in the front on the street. The fence on the frontage, had already been granted a variance a little while ago, a few years ago, to be a 6-foot fence that had lattice on the top 2 feet because of the traffic. That was a concern there, but the side yard fence didn't have that same concern. So, long story short, the zoning board of appeals said no variance, no hardship shown, therefore no variance for the 4-foot fence. So that was interesting to see because of this whole fence issue, to see that they actually stuck to their guns.
They have to. They're under the scope, they're under the microscope with regard to variances,
Yeah,
and they really do have to show a hardship.
It was
Yeah.
unanimous vote.
it was unanimous
be.
vote too. So anyway, that was interesting to see, somewhat unexpected, but anyway.
Can
All
I
right.
bring up one with regard to zoning board of appeals? There is a decision that we have all had in our hands or will have in our hands if you haven't reviewed and signed the copies that sit down there. And one is for a house that is to be 33.5 feet to the ridge at 12R Pigeon Hill Street. And the long and the short of that is, well, you know, they didn't know that the site was in fact graded the way it was. They used an architect and it had an engineer, and they didn't realize until the ridge was up, the house had been framed, that it was gonna be 33.5 feet instead of being 33. Oh, well, that's okay. And I'm saying, what? In no other situation are we allowing that sort of allowing an allowance. But that's what they were doing. And it bothered me. My question marks are there in that document. If you haven't already signed it, you'll see them. And it bothers me. But anyway, that's the way things go when in fact too much latitude is either granted or taken by.
So the
zoning board
house
of
had already
appeals.
been constructed and they
Yeah,
figured out it was
the
33
ridge
feet?
is up, and it's 33.5 feet, and, well, that's okay. They tried and they failed, and we're not doing anything with regard to it.
Well, it's
When
unfortunate.
you look at it, go back and look at it if you didn't look at it seriously at the first time, and I don't mean that in a critical sense, I just mean that it could be something that slipped by, but, it's an interesting decision.
Okay, and one other item I have on the general member item is and this probably can be discussed at the next meeting, but one of the emails we have is from the chairman of the Economic Development Committee, Lana Rasdan. And I did speak with her today about this issue of, just in general, commercial space, empty commercial space, conversions of commercial space. And because it is really, it's as much, if not more, of an economic development issue as it is a planning issue, and she suggested that and you'll see, look at her email, I don't have to read it to you, but it's something to think about going forward. This is gonna be a issue where there's gonna be a lot of information that is gonna need to be gathered. And anyway, I think that's what she's suggesting in her October 3, 2019 I don't know why she has that date on it. That's not correct because it couldn't have been written to me on October 3. That might be the wrong date on it, but the memo that she attached to her email. So that's just something to think about when we have our discussion next meeting. So, okay.
On that topic, I was thinking of reaching out to Jim Ugoni to see what the commission would have to say about
Yeah,
this
they
topic.
need to be a part of it. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna be, because it involves the downtown, because it involves a historic district, you know, this is, and because it involves economic development, this isn't just a planning board issue.
No,
This
I
is,
agree
you know, and a
100%.
historical,
It's also
Right.
bigger. Right? It's a bigger issue
it is a
Then-
bigger issue.
than people just saying, well, don't let the investors of the properties turn it to residential. It's much larger than that.
Well, you know, what you don't want to do, I mean, and what, obviously, it's a long road to come to a conclusion here, but you don't want to do something that's going to make a bad situation worse.
Right.
You know, that's something we don't want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's,
I got one thing. I went to a meeting, I went to a couple of these meetings with Tom and Herm once on the, what is that?
Community interest in.
Community interest in,
And,
Cape Ann Climate Crisis.
yeah, right, Kamek,
Action.
however you wanna describe, that's it, you've
and,
got it.
so I put myself, I put myself going to meetings on, what we should do, what we should work on as communities. And I think, this is really a question, so I said, I'm here because I wanna keep track of what's going on Gloucester and so forth. But I guess I think, this is to Tom, as you a member of the Green Committee, you're on the Green Committee too, right,
Yes.
Tom? You guys are working on stuff, maybe I should be interacting with you from what I found out on my committee.
Good.
Come to one of your meetings
Yeah.
and talk about stuff. But then, like Gloucester's done a bunch of stuff on, they made it so that all the residents in Gloucester, for instance, could go and get their electric power from some group as opposed to, the electric company
That's an aggregation.
aggregation,
It was an
yeah.
opt-out aggregation.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, we didn't even know about that's going on.
Nope.
Actually, and we ought to, and maybe it's something we should all be looking at, and, as well, and we're also looking at solar installations and so forth. Working with solar companies for the greater Cape Ann community. So just to keep you aware that that's going on, I'll work with, Green guys, Green Committee,
When is that
to
next
see where
meeting?
that's going.
When is that next meeting?
I don't know when the next big meeting
The
is.
Cape Ann Climate Crisis
Yeah.
Action Meeting is December 11th.
December 11th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although some of the subgroups have agreed to meet before.
Yeah, I've met with
Okay.
this is a sub.
Subgroup, oh, okay, all right.
I don't know where this thing is going, I think let's see.
okay, anybody have anything else?
Interesting.
All right, we'll go on to the second comment period. If members of the public have any further comment, now's the time to do it. You can step right up to the
Don't wait for them.
microphone, say who you are and where you live and what you're going to say.
Laura Kozacek, 293 Granite Street. I have a comment, a question, if that's okay, and then I wanted to tell you about something
Okay.
that I thought would be your purview, that I wanted to share about a meeting that I had with Lawrence Susskind at MIT. I wanted to ask a question in your discussion when you were talking about gross floor area and all of that. That got me thinking about some issues. I'm on the Conservation Commission, and we've had recently a new thing we're dealing with at 25 Long Beach with a house that is being substantially added to. However, it's not being dealt with as a an increase of more than 50% of the valuation of the house. Therefore, it's not apparently subject to our bylaws and other building code restrictions that would have to do with building on a coastal dune, which I find very, very strange because I've examined the house myself on a site visit. It's a 1940 summer cottage. Anything, I mean, if the windows were replaced in this house, it would increase the value about 50%, it seems to me. So this is a house that's going to be heightened by at least a floor and then some with an attic. The same thing has happened recently to the house adjacent next door to it. This is in the second row, so it's considered not to be in the velocity zone. However, it's considered when you're that close to the velocity zone in building, the recommendation is to follow the same recommendations or requirements, really, that you would in a velocity zone. At any rate, I feel as if, I don't know how we can ask the building inspector to look at this a little more closely, but when I see a house right next to it that's been increased by more than a floor, it looks more like 2 floors to me. That's already happened, and now this one is going to undergo the same thing, and it's literally on single cinder block piles.
Why don't you get to your
columns.
question,
Yeah, what's
because
the-
you're
Yeah.
running out of time here.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we
I
have a
just
3-minute
wondered-
rule.
Excuse me, sorry. Anyway, I just wondered about what could be done about
Gotta talk to the selectmen.
asking for.
We have no.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't,
so
we
it
don't
sounded
deal with
similar.
that issue.
And we have no jurisdiction over
Okay.
that anyway.
Okay, all right. Sorry I took up
No,
my
no,
time
that's
with
okay.
that.
Go ahead.
Is it all right if I do
Yep,
a
you
second?
Got another minute.
A minute, okay. Recently, I had an opportunity to talk to Lawrence Susskind at MIT, who put together this book some time ago. Some of you might be familiar with it. This is a very wonderful and exuberant piece done by the citizens of Rockport and students of Lawrence Susskind in 1974. So
We're
I was
well
having.
aware of that.
You're well aware of that,
Yeah.
yeah. He gave me some extra copies if anybody
Okay.
wants one. I wore out the one from the
Okay,
library.
what's your next thing?
That is
Tick,
my,
tick,
my, what I wanted to tell you about is that I had a chance to talk to him about small communities, what's working elsewhere economically, by also being able to preserve the nature of a community when economic issues are upon us. And he had a lot of interesting examples to give, and I thought that you would all be particularly interested to maybe have a kind of a follow-up, an opportunity to talk to somebody who is a senior professor of urban planning, environmental
it?
planning.
Do you have something?
No,
And I'm
I
only
would
rushing
be-
you along because you got like 10 seconds left.
Sure, I would be really happy to work with you to put something together. He's willing to come and talk, but I thought that the invitation might be best coming from you. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to get on your agenda, but it was a last-minute opportunity for me to come, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go and talk to those guys and just share about that. He had a lot of pretty exciting
You know,
things
sometimes
to say.
your time's up now,
Yep.
but sometimes it's better when you have something like this to talk about is send us an email or send us a letter or something like that. It's much better
Yes,
for us
I'll
then.
do that. I'll
Right,
send you a
okay.
follow-up,
All
okay?
right.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it, though.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Toby.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I didn't wish to argue with Miss Wilcox, who says that tourism supports the town. That's hogwash. Going back to the report done by Frank Hassler and Larry Wally Hess, perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, it turned out that tourism supports 8% of the town, and that included song and dance and things that you don't ordinarily think of as tourism. So that, misstatement is regularly trotted out and should be squelched, by public officials. You're concerned about the building inspector, so am I. Terry may feel he's a fine person, and well, he may be, but that doesn't, justify, professional, well, let's not use unkind words. All town officials are supposed to be subject, town employees, to a performance review. You might consider, if you wish something done, to be consulted on the performance review, both you and the Board of Appeals. that would be appropriate, and whether or not you'd get something, it doesn't do any harm to ask. Herman Lydia spoke about his surprise that the Board of Appeals granted I think he said variance for a 33-foot high building. It should be no cause for surprise. I believe what they grant are special permits, not variances, and if you go back through the records, when I last looked, which would be about 5 years ago, there were 28 on record, and they had denied one. So if you find it surprising, you might do something about it. That is, change the zoning code so that they can't grant the special permits.
See?
Yeah, Z. Seppel on 92 Granite Street. I just want to second Laura's motion that it might be a nice idea to have a professional urban planner from a top-ranked university in the United States come here. I know I'm very familiar with that planning for the future of Rockport because I'm the one that first got him to send copies down here. And I talked with him, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. It's an excellent document. I think that we have a tremendous crowd again here tonight, 3 people, one more than normal. And I think really it would be just amazing to see what would happen if you did invite somebody that's outside of the Rockport inbound process that we seem to have on everything, and get some fresh ideas and some fresh perspective, just to see if anybody more would show up. I know with the hearings from the state, when they come, the room is crowded. They have to move them to the high school auditoriums to get enough room for people. So I'd just like to say, Laura, thank you for coming. Thank you for mentioning that. And I agree 100% with her suggestion.
Okay. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Motion made by Terry, second the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Herman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's now 8:43. Meeting is adjourned.